can. Anyway,
that's exactly why you should do things.
That's right. Like, why'd you do that? Because I can.
Because you smugly tell yourself in the mirror.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Somebody asked me one day. Thank you everybody for joining. We'll get to the real point here in a minute. So somebody asked me one day. I was out with my kids were with my ex-wife, and my kids asked me. I belong to this wine club in Dallas, and my kids texted me on a Friday like, "Dad, what are you doing?" I was like, "I'm out, with my friends." They're like, "What are you doing?" So I sent them a picture of the wine I was drinking, which is older than I am. And my kids were like, "Why are you drinking a wine from 1967?" I was like, "Because I can." It's like,
what better year, in fact?
It was a very, very nice 67 Chateau Latour. It's an amazing bottle of wine.
My wife and I for New Year's had a delightful Boone's Farm. I believe it was a blue raspberry, some might call it. Fine, a good year.
So I will tell you this joke, and then we'll get to Dungeons and Dragons and AD&D and all that kind of stuff. And when I still worked at the university, I worked at MIT, and I was in the defense industry forever. And I've got friends all over defense, and I have email addresses for some fairly well-positioned people. And at the time he was retired, he was not Secretary of Defense yet, but I know General Mattis a little bit. He eventually became Secretary of Defense, and his nickname throughout his career was Mad Dog. So in 2020, I was emailing him like, "Dude, you got to run for president." And he's like, "Why?" I was like, "The campaign slogan could be Mad Dog 2020. He's like, "That's not a winning." I'm like, "Dude, come on!" It's like, seriously, never again are we going to be able to do anyone.
That's a horrifically missed opportunity, first of all. Also, just to add on to that story, fun fact, my nickname for years when I worked at a bar was also Mad Dog, which is very amusing to hear.
Yeah, well, he had it for a whole different reason.
Very likely. I'm pretty sure he wasn't punching people in bars, so.
Yeah, but anyway. Okay, now. Back to Dungeons and Dragons, which is why we were here in the first place.
Back to Dungeons and Dragons.
Exactly. So you've got the new edition. I've got the new edition. And I have heard people go, and by the way, I want everybody to know before I get accused of it, I am not a shill. I am not paid by Hasbro Wizards of the Coast. They haven't sent me free books. I bought them. Okay.
I should probably mention they did send me free books.
Oh, see, you're on the good boy list.
Well, just this one right here is the free. That one I paid for with my own hard-earned money. So
all right, so because I've been accused of being a shill for like 4 days. So I'm
if you say anything nice about Dungeons and Dragons at all,
not a shill.
Yeah.
So I've read the new book, the new Player's Handbook, cover to cover. Okay, I didn't read all the stat blocks, but I basically read everything else, and I'm up to chapter 3 in the Dungeon Master Guide.
Right.
Okay. Now let's start with the Player's Handbook. A lot of people have there's been YouTube channel after YouTube channel and streaming guy after streaming guy saying, "Oh my God, it's terrible. Politics on every page. You can't tolerate it. Burn it at the stake," because every word in it is dripping with what I looked carefully. And the text, we'll get to the art. We'll get to the art in a minute, separate conversation, but the text that was written, I didn't see any agenda-driven politics, gender, anything. I mean, I looked carefully. I didn't even see the word he, she, or they. I saw player character and NPC, but I didn't even see mention of gender or sex anywhere. And
oh man. Well, I mean, first of all, we have to acknowledge that there is very much money and fame, or as some people call it, the YouTube algorithm looks for people who create sensations, right? So whenever a new Player's Handbook comes out and you want to get views on YouTube, you've got basically 2 choices, right? You either have to have the first deep dive of how the game works, so that way you can get the jump on players who are looking to YouTube for advice and how to make this, or you go path B, which is, let me explain why this is the worst thing you've ever heard of, even though it's been out for 20 minutes now since my store opened, right? And because that's where the algorithm is, right? That's where the looks are. So it's like, the second I see anything is talking about how how any game is the worst thing ever. My immediate belief is, okay, what this is for the old algo, right?
Yeah.
Because I've looked through this too. And now granted, I would argue that I am I'm pretty left leaning. I would argue that. So maybe it's my own bias when reading this, but I'm also not. I'm not seeing the problem other than some hand-picked art choices that people shared around for a while, trying to drum up as much anger as humanly possible, right? Ignoring some amazing art pieces that say the exact opposite of what they are trying to pretend like it says.
Well, exactly. So I didn't see it, and we're going to get to Dungeon Master, guys. I don't want anybody to think I'm skipping that one. But Player's Handbook, I didn't see it, and I live in Dallas, Texas, which is sort of that right-leaning whatever. Which is kind of funny to me because when I lived in Massachusetts, people called me a right-wing weirdo, and in Texas they call me a left-wing lunatic, and I'm like, I'm the same person. I haven't changed. But I think both political extremes kind of have lost their freaking mind. But to me, even looking at it objectively, scientist hat on, guy who's written 7 fiction novels myself and read over 1,000 of them in my life. I didn't see the politics. It wasn't in your face, at least in the writing. Now, in the art, since you brought that up, I've been to a lot of art museums in my life. I flew to Italy to go to nothing but art museums. I've been to Paris art museums, New York, Boston, Washington, D.C. Art museums are my thing in life because I suck as an artist, but I really like looking at it.
Right.
So I own 4 original Salvador Dali's and an original Walt Disney. So I have art in my life. It is everywhere.
It's the same reason I watch naughty videos on the internet. I suck at it, but I like to watch it. Yeah, no, I get it.
There you go. So I'm not going to tell you anything. She probably knows.
She knows.
Anyway, so my point is, any 2 people looking at a piece of art are going to take away different things. You're going to see what you want to see. You're going to come in with some preconceived notions. Some of the artists were outspoken about, I want to put this in, I want to put that in. And then I think that got blown out of proportion into every piece of art in there sucks. Some were good. Some was like, eh. But the one thing I carried away from it throughout the whole book, and this kind of bothered me, and I didn't notice it until somebody else pointed it out to me. And now that I've heard it, I can't unhear it. Mm-hmm. None of the characters in the book, with the exception of the Dragonlance painting that's sort of in the beginning of it, none of them look like they're struggling. They either look like they're having a party or they're about to win a fight.
So, okay. Well, to counter that, I literally just flipped to this page out of nowhere. But might I interest you in this rogue running like hell from this very angry dragon?
Right. I forgot about that one. Okay. So yeah, there is even that in there, but the majority of them look like players having a party.
So I was talking to a friend of mine who designed a game and has been really heavily in the marketing of it of games and such. And we were talking about
that's tough to do, by the way. Marketing a game is freaking hard.
Yeah. So, and I've been Daniel Fox. He created Zweihander, and I'm one of the writers on Zweihander Reforged. This is not me turning this into a commercial for Zweihander, but we were talking about what the cover of the book would end up looking like, and I had my he was kind of asking what our opinions were, and I wanted to have like the lofty leather tome, right, with like just symbology. You remember the 3rd edition cover? Yeah. Love that. That's what I grew up on with D&D is leathery tome with metal inlay, right? And he pointed out that that a lot of games are going towards the idea of showing characters having either fun or having adventure, right? Not you show this because especially in a player's book, because you want players to see that and immediately think, I too can have high excitement. I too can have fun. I too can look like the sexiest neon pink copper dragonborn. Sorry, that's one of my favorite art pieces. That bard.
I actually after reading the book, I rolled up a Dragonborn because I'd never played one before, and now I really want to.
Oh, my daughter just rolled one up. It's her very favorite of the species that exist. But anyway,
I got a blue Dragonborn I just rolled up. So
yeah, the marketing of it all, right? At least according to my friend Dan, is that it kind of boils down to wanting to get people drawn into wanting to have the fun aspect of it. And then you show them the horror side later. Have you been looking at any of the art that's been released for the Monster Manual?
I have, yeah, and that's some of it's brutal, yeah.
Yeah, right. And because that's the you want to inspire the players to have fun. You want to inspire the dungeon master to give them hell, right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of the idea, I think.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So speaking of dungeon master, so I want to show you something that I think is funny. I own a social media company, so I used it this morning to blast some things out because sometimes I can't help myself.
I've played that game and lost.
And I did this one on purpose because people yesterday pissed me off. I put these 3 Dungeon Master Guide right next to each other, and the world is still rotating upon its axis. Nothing has exploded. Fireballs are not raining from the sky. Everything is okay.
Well, at least not in the Midwest United States, right?
At least not in the Midwest United States. Maybe out in California. But they had that problem before. Okay, it's not my fault.
I am not laughing at California. Just so we're clear.
I keep getting offered jobs out there, and I'm like, really?
I got some family out in LA right now. Kind of keep an eye on them, making sure it's a terrible situation.
Yeah, it is, and it's coming close to a lot of people I know in Pasadena. So I'm like, I hope they all do okay. But Player's Handbook. So you have kids that are younger. I have kids that are oldest one's 15. The youngest one is turns 12 tomorrow.
Yep.
And I went through the Dungeon Master Guide, and like I said, I've only gone through the first 2 chapters, and I'm kind of starting chapter 3. But the first chapter is the one that seems to offend everyone, right? And it's like, oh my God, it has this fill out the blank card. It has this, safety feature. It has all this other stuff. And the one I read through it, and I looked at it like, hey, I've been playing this book since Moldvay, right? The red book was the one I played with my dad and started in early 82. And I will always remember my dad being the DM because now it sticks in my head a lot more than when I was a kid. If he was playing an NPC that was a tavern keeper, he would tell you anything you wanted to know about the local area for an ale, but you actually had to go get dad a beer from the fridge before he would tell you anything. So he was really into it, man. He was like really role playing.
You guys sure you don't want to talk to the innkeeper right now? Because I'm feeling a bit dry.
It's like, you want to talk to the innkeeper for longer? We could do that, right?
The innkeeper's kind of feeling old-fashioned, kids, if you know how to mix.
That's right. Actually, I do know how to make a really nice old-fashioned because of dad. I knew how to do that when I was like 15. Manhattan as well, which is kind of the same drink, just in a different glass.
A lot more vermouth. Yeah,
a little bit. But anyway. So, but the first chapter, and the first chapter is not aimed at Gen X, right? We grew up playing the game. We've been around forever. But the first chapter of the Dungeon Master Guide, the new one, has these like lists of, hey, what do you expect out of the game? Hey, here's some ways to get in with a new player. But it's not the same game as we had in 82, and society's different. Here's my point. My kids grew up in an era where everybody had online everything, right? They're not used to sitting in a room with people doing stuff.
Right.
Their social skills are not the same as mine were when I was a kid. I've done my best to keep everybody in Little League and everything else, and that's great. And they do fine. My kids are doing okay. But they also grew up in a world of COVID where everybody went home for a year and a half in the middle of some really important social development years.
Yep.
And they're lacking a lot of social skills. That first chapter, while Gen X and some other people may find it highly offensive, I think helps that generation understand how to sit at a table and not piss everybody off. And I also think a lot of people now are finding online groups to play with for people you've never met. And as a DM in the 80s, I would have always known everybody I sat at a table with well enough to know, like, okay, you can't really talk about this with that person because it pisses them off. You can't. But if I'm picking up an online group, I may not have ever met these people or been in a room, right? It's just not the way it works. So I think that first chapter, well, we may look at it and go like, oh, you're destroying the game. First off, the older edition, it's still there. It hasn't burnt up. It still exists, right? You don't have to use the new one. But some people have gotten to the point where like the mere existence of the new one detracts from what first edition is. It makes it worse. I'm like, how the fuck does it do that? I don't understand.
So I think about this. So my gaming group right now, I have two separate gaming groups that I kind of divide them out. My Tuesday, my Thursday, and then I also have a Sunday group that I play with. For the most part, most of the people in my gaming groups I've known for 5 to 10 years, right? And I've had years to get to know them as people. And we've been playing these games for a long time. My children, they know their friends fairly well, right? But not 10 years worth, because they weren't understanding other people at age 2, right? That's
Right.
and something I want to point out, which I feel is very important. If you look right there on the credits page, there's this little symbol right here, and I feel people keep ignoring that. There's a little circle right here with the number 12 plus. So what that symbol is trying to tell us is that this is a game that is designed with 12-year-olds and older in mind, right? It's on one hand, I think it's really easy for people to
for everybody to realize this is the original blue box. I still have it, right? The expert set. It says 10 plus.
Yeah, right. So the
10-year-old.
Yeah, and the thing is like, it's on one hand there's the argument of like, let's not baby our kids. Like they can they need to learn by being tossed into the deep end. Although I notice most of the people who say that are people who don't actually have kids, so they have zero idea what it's like to get a call from the principal saying, "Hey, your child is saying curse words and you need to come take them out of school." And like, oh, I guess my kid wasn't cool enough not to curse, right?
And it's not the same as when I was a kid. You could curse in school and get away with it, except for the fact that I went to Catholic school and I still have nun marks on my knuckles from where I did that.
Right. Yeah.
So but they hit you first and call dad later, which made it worse.
I too was raised Catholic. And anymore, teachers are not empowered to rap you on the knuckles anymore. They are empowered to get you out of school, so that way they can deal with the other 50 kids in their classrooms, because the classrooms are over full, right? So they unfortunately, if your kid doesn't get in line, they got to go. But the point I feel with this is that on a good day, my kids are not the most socially adept, but that's because they're kids, right? They're just children. I should not expect a child to fully understand the intricacies of dealing with 5 people at a table trying to as we like to call it as dungeon masters, corralling cats, right? I mean, hell, there's a reason why management is often a better paid job than your base level employee. And this isn't to say that all managers are deserving of it. What I am saying is it's a tough job. It is difficult to interact with this many people and try to coexist and work together with one other adult marriage, but also 2 other adults, 3 other adults, 4 adults, 5 adults, right? This is not an easy thing, right? Social interactions.
There's a reason I stopped running gigantic projects and started working on little ones. And another reason I became the chief technology officer of a company was, well, 1, because I own it and I qualified. But 2 is as the CTO instead of the CEO or the CMO, which I could arguably go say, hey, look, I own the place, I'm going to be the CEO. I don't want the job, because then I got to deal with people all day. As a CTO, I just have to make sure shit works.
Right.
So, and I'd rather do that than I would deal with people all day, right? So
we know that dealing with people, it can be complex social dynamics. Isn't second nature to 99% of people on Earth, and I would bet you the 1% that says it does are probably lying. So the fact that they have a chapter dedicated to a chapter of a book made for 12-year-olds and over has a chapter on, hey, here are tips and tricks on how to lubricate these social interactions to where they don't devolve into fighting. Because I remember when I played Dungeons & Dragons when I was a teenager with my idiot teenage friends, and I was an idiot teenager too. I would love to say we had all kinds of fun and it was great. No, there's tons of hard feelings and arguments that we didn't need to have. There were games canceled because me and the dungeon master or me and a player were just not butting heads right, and we weren't socially mature enough to figure that out. And these were the people we knew. These are with people we knew, right? So of course there's a chapter about this. Of course they're going to talk about this.
I mean, and especially in 2024, where it's just a different world than we had even when 10 years ago when the 5th edition came out. And honestly, this new edition is not really a new edition. It's 5th edition with some nudges here and there.
Yeah, it's polished up. It's the what do you call it? It's the errata that Tasha's was finally put into the main book.
Yeah, and so it's if you have fifth edition, you're playing it. This you're essentially this. It's the same game.
Yeah.
But so I think the people complaining about it are really kind of over the top, and I want to address one issue, and I'd love to get your take on it. So there was Kyle Brink, the guy that came out and said people like me can't leave the hobby fast enough. Right. So I've taken a bunch of crap on Twitter in the last couple of days. One person called me homosexual. Another person called me retarded. Somebody told me I was too stupid to breathe because I'm still buying stuff from Wizards of the Coast.
Oh.
All of which I was like, okay, I don't care. I'm still going to do it. I'm like, dude, I'm Gen X. You could call me more names than that. It's not going to bother me. I was in the Army. I had drill sergeants. You guys aren't even close to what's going to take to get me riled up. But the thing about that guy, okay, yeah, he said some things that were regrettable. And I'm not trying to excuse what he said, because if he and I were having a conversation right now, I'd be like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? Would be my first question. But when people say that kind of stuff, and then other people like, well, how can you possibly keep playing the game? First off, I've been playing this since '82, and some of my fondest memories of playing this game were with my dad as the DM, telling me to go get a beer, and my grandmother as a player character, right? So those people are both gone from the surface of the earth, and I hope my kids someday have the same memories about me playing with them, right? So D&D is always going to be part of my RPG community. It's just always going to be there,
Yeah,
right?
The game you like.
It's the game. It's the game I grew up with. This I have a lot of fond memories of it. And when somebody like that comes out and says people like you can't leave the hobby fast enough, my thought is, for a couple of months, I stopped talking about it on Twitter and some other places just because people were getting too much infighting in the community. And I kind of got to the point where I'm like, this is what I want to do. I don't care about the social media side of it, but if I'm going to be on social media, I'm going to talk about my interests because that's the social part. And if my interests are RPGs, I'm not going to stop myself from talking about RPGs because some people online are assholes. When even in the book, it says, don't be a jerk, right? So you're not even reading the rule book that you say you're paying attention to. But my point is, like Kyle Brink, you want me to leave the hobby? Well, screw you. I'm sticking around, and I'm not only going to stick around, I'm going to be loud about the fact that I'm here, and I hope it pisses you off, sir. So,
well, did you watch the interview?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So then you'll. I mean, so I remember that interview very clearly. With Kyle Brink, or pretty clearly. And I remember that on that specific topic, and this isn't to debate anybody here, but on that the context of that comment, I believe,
yeah, it does get cut up a lot.
It gets cut up a lot because the thing is, he wasn't in the context of the conversation, he was not talking about to the players. He was talking about the management teams of tabletop RPGs, and how in management, because he was talking about how he wants to see that he was talking about that game companies are becoming more diversified. There are all more people's voices who are in the room. So when Kyle Brink said that old white men like us can't get out of the hobby fast enough, I believe he was speaking directly towards the point that they were talking about, which was older white guys in management. Because he had talked about how he envisions a future in which a CEO or head writers are not old white guys. Get other names. They're like we had Janelle Jaquez, right? I absolutely butchered her name. Jaquez. My brain is not putting it together properly.
But I see your point, and I think you're right. I think he also should have clarified that. I think Hasbro should have come out and clarified it, because there was a lot of crap that went on.
The thing is, I think he did, because it was in the conversation. Yeah. When somebody takes half a sentence out of your conversation and then says, you said this, if you listen to the whole thing, it was pretty clear, I felt. And so I'm wondering,
I think you're right, because it's happened to me in my career. Okay. Because let me tell you what I'm talking about, because there was a time when I was at the university where I was working on different projects that were Army funded. And for anybody who doesn't know, I was working on ballistic materials for the Army. He did fail at the PR tour, Grimlar. So he should have fixed it, but he didn't. And anyway, so there was a time when I was working on ballistic materials for the Army. I was testing bulletproof glass. I was designing stuff for the Army and other bulletproof stuff.
Sure.
And I had this chance to test this one, and I'm not going to say the company name because I've already been in enough trouble for this.
Walmart.
Sure. But this one company came up with this new bulletproof vest for the Army, and the Army tested it, and they said this sucks, and they wouldn't buy them. So the company sued the Army. Okay. And so the company sent it to me, or the Army sent it to me. Can you give us a third-party test so that we can just tell this guy to go away and the courts will leave us alone? And I tested it, and it worked great from this angle and this angle only. Anytime you had any other angle, it didn't work at all. So I sent it back to the Army with my notes and 100 tests that I ran with high-speed video and images and the whole 9 yards. And sure enough, some newspaper reporter got a hold of it, because newspapers are still a thing then. And this USA Today reporter kind of cornered me and goes, "Dr. Imholt, you were the one that tested that stuff for the thing, right?" I said, "Yes, sir, I was." "So would you recommend it for the Army?" I was like, "Well, whose Army?" And they said, "Well, the U.S. Army." I was like, "Oh God, no, I wouldn't recommend it for the U.S. Army at all." And they were like, "Well, whose Army would you recommend it for?" I was like, "Well, if the insurgents want to use it, because the war on terror was took on." Right. Like, I'm fine with that. So next day in the newspaper, Dr. Imholt highly recommends. And I was like, the company was not pleased. Let's just say I spent a lot of time with lawyers after that. So I get, things being taken completely out of context. I made a joke that I thought was funny. And sure enough, next thing you know, I'm in a lot of trouble. So I'm like, I get it. PR disasters happen.
Right.
And Kyle had one. If I was Wizards of the Coast, but I'm not, right, I would have come out and fixed it at some point. And been like,
well, so like, here's my thoughts on that. And this is this is the side of me that doesn't make many friends here. So there were some people who were upset about that comment. If I'm not mistaken, 90% of those people, I'm just making up a number because I love making up numbers. Yeah, okay. Right. It was Twitter, right? 90% of these people were getting mad on Twitter. But the thing is that Twitter is not the sales market. It has people who are purchasing things exist on that platform, but it is not indicative of the what do you call it? I would argue that it is not the true litmus test for what's actually happening out there in the industry, right? So then,
not even close,
yeah, right. So my question is then is do you make a press release about about a small group on a large part of an area on one platform, but in the grand scheme of things, a very small area and small group of people? Do you make a press release? Do you go through all the lawyers? Do you go through all of that just to talk to a small group of people who will not listen anyway, right?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, because
the thing is that we have right now in the tabletop role-playing Twitter community, we have had two major things of people getting upset. One is the Paizo comment from back in August. Okay, August, right?
And honestly, I didn't even know that guy's name until like 2 days ago. Right.
Yeah. The next
one, have picked him out of a lineup.
Right. the next one is A Forge of Foes which was released over a year ago. Right. But suddenly now the anti-colonial chapter and the romancing monsters part is the big problem. It's like, Twitter is not a place you go to for rational conversation. If you try to approach them rationally by explaining yourself, you're just walking into an area that purely exists to kick up a shitstorm. And since everything's too quiet right now, we're now seeing shitstorms from 3 months to a year ago, because what else is there to do, right?
What else there to do, yeah. So I had somebody, because they said I was just all in for Wizards of the Coast. And I was like, I'm not, but you want me to hate something, and what you're saying about the product I'm supposed to hate is just not true.
Right.
And they're like, well, you don't get it, and you're part of the problem. And I'm like, okay, I'm part of the problem, I guess. But, sure, if you want to say that, but I don't really care. But I tried pointing out, and this is part of what started it. So I tried pointing out good things that were in the Dungeon Master Guide, and God forbid you actually find a good one in there. So this is straight out of the new book, right? See that last sentence. Don't let players get away with being jerks to other players using the excuse, that's what my character would do. They print it right there in the book. And people are like, well, and then all of a sudden it became, so why are you shilling for them? I'm like, well, I'm just saying that they're doing good stuff, guys. I'm like, because I've seen that at tables, and I've seen people complaining about that player. Like, oh, what about the player that's like, what's my character would do? I'm like, that guy's just being a dick. You got to stop it. You got to deal with it. Right?
I love seeing that call. There's a couple of moments that I saw in the new books where they call out some very specific behaviors that many of us game masters have either seen firsthand, or we as players or game masters have seen firsthand, or we've seen the horror stories on Reddit. And also, yes, I see your comment there, Grimoire's Gaming Lair, and absolutely release Dark Sun, you cowards. Anyway, and I love that they address them. Like they talk about the peasant railgun comes up at one point in one of the books where they're talking about how, yes, technically speaking, physics wise, you may be able to get a spear to travel at
they brought that up.
But this does not mean it should be in the game, right? It's what my character would do. The battle cry of every socially inept a-hole that walks in any table, right?
Right.
I love that they have these little commentaries in there, just sort of that wink and the nod to the dungeon master or to people who've been playing this game long enough of like, no, we've been playing this game too. We get it.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm with you. I think that comment was definitely hitting on our context. Now, the ones that people do get a little bit upset about that actually is kind of justified is the 50th anniversary book had the two guys in the front that wrote like 2 pages each, and they kind of ripped Gary apart and Dave Arneson apart, and they were kind of dicks, right? But what's funny is I bought that book, the 50th anniversary one, and the only pages that had shit like that on there were those 4 pages. The rest of it was fantastic history. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but those 4 pages caused everybody to go nuts. And I'm like, it's a 560-page book. I've read enough textbooks in my life to know that you're never going to find a book where 100% of everything you look at it and go, that's pretty good. This is less than 1% of it. It's 4 paragraphs out of a book. Yeah, they were dicks to write that stuff. But at the same time, it's like, come on, guys, get over it.
To be 100% honest, I have not. I own the book, but I have not actually had the chance to read through it, so I have very little I can comment on with it.
So what I liked about it was the handwritten notes back and forth between Gary and Dave. I thought that was pretty cool, and there's just some stuff in it that's just not anywhere else, which I thought was neat. But all right, so let's get on to a happier thing. I wanted to get your take on it because I know you got little kids, and it's a Wednesday night, so you've got to, of course, get up in the morning at some unknown time yet, which is always fun.
The best.
My older son does not realize he's 15, and he's like, I can't wait to turn 16 to get my license. I'm like, dude, you and me both. And he's like, why? I was like, oh, you'll see.
Because you can give you and your siblings a ride to school.
That way I can get you a car, and I don't have to get up in the morning and take you guys wherever you want to go. You could take them.
I can hang out in my bathroom, just wave to you out the door.
Yeah, later. And his big thing in life, he's like, he wants a Tesla. So I'm like, I'm going to get you a Model 3 Tesla. It's the cheapest one. And he's like, really? And he doesn't realize I'm doing that because I can monitor every little thing that shit does.
Oh, yeah. So you don't need to buy the extra low jack. It's already built in.
It's built into the freaking car. He's like, yeah. So people are like, oh, your car can spy on you. I'm like, no, I can spy on my teenager. That's the point. Because I know what I did when I was 16, and I don't want him doing half of that crap.
A whole lot of hugging.
Sure, let's call it. So I wanted to ask you a question. I was talking to Jack from Scotland earlier, and we came up with an idea.
Color Jack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So we came up with an idea we're putting out, and I'm going to throw this to you, and I'll let you noodle on this one because I don't want to take all night on a live stream tonight. But thank you, by the way, for talking through that stuff. I agree with you on these new editions. Everybody's crazy over nothing.
I will say I have some parts of them I'm not a particular fan of. I will be very clear about that. But it's just not these issues, right? Like
I can say that about any edition. There's bits of it I'm like, okay, I would do that different or that different or that.
Or like, have you read through like chase scenes in the Dungeon Master's Guide? They didn't change them. They're still trash. I'm very upset about it. Like really, I'm like legitimately angry that because I'm now creating my own to use at the table. Sorry, I interrupted you to.
No, that was even Gary said at the beginning. Like there was somewhere in one of the earlier editions, or somewhere I read that Gary said, well, God, I'm not sure what we're going to do if the community ever realizes they don't really need us. it's a problem. So you're familiar with deities and demigods, right? The old
yeah.
So in deities and demigods, they actually have the Arthurian characters, the Arthurian legend characters. So Jack and I were talking about, hey, and I threw this out on Twitter. Let's gather some folks. Let's say, okay, everybody submit your versions of what can take down King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. What would you have to put together to beat these guys? Right, collectively, how big would your party have to be to take down King Arthur and his fellow knights? And I'm not sure. So what we're thinking about doing is having people submit it, and then we'll just roll it out in a live stream and say, okay, you think that's going to beat them? Let's fight it out. Let's see who wins.
Let's see. What do we got? A 14th level paladin. Goodness.
Yeah, with armor class 0, and he carries Excalibur.
Now that's and now forgive me here. I did mention that I got my start in 3rd edition. So armor class of 0 would mean, because this is Thaco, right?
Yeah, it's Thaco. Yeah.
Yeah. So armor class of 20, right?
Yeah.
That's basically what that boils down to. Okay. Yeah. 123 hit points. Good lord, boy.
Oh, wait for it. You've also got to take down all these guys. So you've got another, armor class where it's basically C below, because you're not getting through his shit. Sir Galahad, armor class of -4. Sir Gareth of Orkney, my armor class of -2. Sir Gawain, -2. Sir, you go down the list. And then you get over to, let me see if I can find it, Merlin, who can see ever so slightly into the future.
well, first of all, I think the answer was in the Invisible Knight, right? What you got to do? Because if you look at the Invisible Knight's alignment is not lawful good, right?
Yeah.
So
you got to go through him.
Well, you don't got to go through him. You got to get him on your side.
Oh, you need a okay.
I mean, you got a paladin, right? You got a whole group led by a paladin. You know that the Invisible Knight is not having it, right? You can go for the straight up assault, like let's get a great red dragon to come down and attack them, right? Or let's get a group of sneaky rogues that can or thieves, I guess, that can do that. But I would argue that you get all you need is just one. You just need to get that guy on your side, and then you start whittling away at them from within.
That's interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to if we're gonna take the stat blocks into account, let's keep in mind that lawful good and that chaotic evil, complete opposite sides of the 9-part alignment spectrum, right?
That's an interesting point. If you get the guy on your side, that might work.
And the beautiful part is you don't even need to get him on your side. You just need to get him to not be on Arthur's side anymore, right? Suddenly you have the Invisible Knight coming at you with swinging his sword or whatever weapon they gave him in that, and now Arthur's basically taken off the field as he's trying to take care of one of his own. Odds are the guy's not going to go for the killing blow right off the bat because good. So you buy yourself a round or two with that. Whole group goes into chaos.
So the only thing I could come up with, and the trouble always runs into Merlin because he's got that ability to see ever so slightly in the future.
Right.
So the only thing I could come up with was a couple of really high level wizards and Meteor Swarm, and hope they're outside, because if you're fighting inside, you can't really use Meteor Swarm very well, right? It doesn't work.
Well, not in that edition, although in 5th edition you totally can.
Right. Okay. 5th edition you can, but let's just go with it's outside, and I've got enough mages that have level 9 spells that I can cast a shitload of Meteor Swarm and kind of hope for the best, right?
Right.
And maybe pack it with 60 kobolds that go after him after that, right? So it's like, let's just send in a bunch of Kender and see what happens, right? The Kender can kind of annoy them until it wins.
Oh yeah, just pure unrelenting chaos. Or I'm trying to think of like creatures that can exist outside of time and space. So maybe they're immune to what Merlin is able to see. What does it mean to see into the future, right?
Maybe a good mind flayer to come in and kind of
20. He can see it coming, but that doesn't mean he can do anything about it. That's 20 mind flayers coming after you. Put them on rollerblades; they're even faster.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
mind flayers. And I'm gonna have nightmares about mind flayers and freaking rollerblades.
That's right? It's good. You heard it here first, folks. It's going to be the actual picture of the mind flayer in Monster Manual 2024. They're all on rollerblades. Yeah.
Or Cthulhu, that's actually come all the way into this plane of existence and just drives you insane.
Yeah. he's just riding on a, what do you call a Segway? I play that game.
I've actually ridden one of those. It's kind of
different. Yeah. How is it?
It's okay. It's a motor scooter you stand up on, basically.
Yeah, it's a sideways scooter. Got it. Okay. All right.
It's all it is. It's a leave it to the mall cops. They can have money.
Yeah, we had have a outdoor mall up here that for a while had their cops on had their mall guards, not cops, on segways, and it was always a hoot to watch them trying to make a turn but not quite mastering it. So the 9-point turn.
I think the idea behind Segway was to have it be this sort of personal thing where people wouldn't use their cars quite as often. And I think if you live downtown or if you live really close to work, you could pull that off. But I think they didn't realize that most Americans live a really long way from where they actually work.
Yeah,
but we don't all live really close to it. Maybe in Manhattan or LA and a few niche places they would kind of meet a lot of demand. But I don't think those places thought they were cool enough to really use, and they kind of misjudged the market. So
yeah, I kind of see this like with the only use I could really see out of them is you get these companies that now have these larger than life campuses. Like we had before Sprint got out by T-Mobile, we had the Sprint campus up here, and it's like a like 9 city blocks, right? It's this massive campus, right? And driving around on it is basically like driving through a small town. So I could see like Segways working there, being useful for that. You park your car, take your Segway to the 15 other buildings you got to go to, or maybe a school, but not something I'm going to be using.
I can see it at the Lockheed Martin. This is the Lockheed Martin assembly line.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, right. I don't want to walk that. I don't want to walk that at all.
I've actually been to it when I worked in the defense industry. They have bicycles people ride up and down it, just because it's huge. You can't.
You don't got to charge the bike, so
you don't have to charge the bike, right? And they've had the bikes there for decades, so it's like just take one of the bikes.
At this point, the mechanic only knows how to fix the bikes. At this point, so like let's not do this to him. Rodney,
well, it's actually funny because in that assembly line, you talk to anybody that works there. I was like, so how does this fit together with that? They're like, I don't know. I only deal with like front struts for they know they're one thing and they know it really well. And they just kind of move around the facility and keep doing that, which is perfect if you think about it. So.
Where does this go at on the jet fighter? Hell if I know.
It's like
it goes in that box. That's where it goes.
It's like that other guy handles that part. I don't know. I do this part over here.
They just go out and find the best Lego set assembly. They are the ones who get to put the jet together, right? They just hand them boxes of newly printed parts or newly created parts. Like, okay, now build us a jet, please.
I will tell you this: the 3D printer stuff that I'm putting together at my new place. My kids have been Lego fanatics for years. They're kind of getting out of Lego because of the 3D printers. They're like, "This is so much better." It's like, yeah, you get to design your own stuff, man.
That's the one hole in my 3D printing that I have is I don't know how to design anything.
We'll
print everybody else's stuff.
I got a whole house full of people that know how to do that. The one thing I'm looking for, and I can't. I'm sure there's one out there somewhere. I'm just not finding it. Is one that lets me print in color because I suck at painting.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if I could design it in color and have it print in the color I want, man, that would just be freaking awesome.
I know that like Hero Forge and oh my gosh, Eldritch Foundry, they have some sort of machine that that paints their minis, I believe. I don't think they're hand painting those when you go and create your custom mini and then choose the already painted option. I'm not sure what they're using for that though. That'd be a good question. The Eldritch Foundry guys are pretty nice guys. You might reach out to them. They might be able to tell you what machine to use for that. But I don't know if it's part of the printer. I think it may just be after the thing. Because right now the filament printers with the because I've looked at those. Yeah, it's changing the color. You have to do it layer by layer and having to.
It's a pain in the ass.
It's a pain in the ass and it's a massive waste of filament because then you have to between every color change you got to throw a chunk away and it's you'll get four separate layers in. You're like, okay, hold on here. I've just thrown out half a roll, right?
Yeah, and I've actually got a buddy back at MIT that actually designs these things. He's like, that's a good question. Let me find out. I'm like, if I stump them, I'm like, this may not exist really. And they may wind up designing one for me just to test it out because the MIT guys are weird like that. So I want to ask you 2 more before I let you go.
Oh, sure.
Did you know there's a stat block that somebody rolled up and put in Dungeon or Dragon magazine for Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck?
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time, actually.
Yeah, right? We did talk about that.
Yeah.
I someday want to do a campaign where I get to play Daffy Duck just because it'd be hilarious.
You want to be the side character? Bugs
Daffy
Bunny,
Duck he's invincible. You can't kill him. His hit points are not applicable because he could take all the damage in the world. He can't do any damage, but he could take all the damage in the world.
Well, yeah, it's like he'll survive, but his bill's going to be on the back of his head as he talks, right? And that's just
that was one of his characteristics. The more damage he takes, just the more annoyed he gets. I'm like, I can play that character. I can do that all day. Well, now, Bugs Bunny's harder to do. You have to be upbeat and happy, but Daffy Duck, man, you can be annoyed. I mean, I could do annoyed.
That's my baseline, baby.
I'm telling you, I was born for this. The other one, I want to get an online group together to play. I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually an RPG called Toon.
Yeah, you've been mentioned that a couple times, actually.
I want to get a group of people together who are sort of forever DMs, right? The guys who never get a chance to play. And I want to get some forever DMs to actually sit down and play this one across, like, because it's you could do it in a couple hours. It's a Steve Jackson Games thing. It's not huge.
Right.
But I'm like, I want to get some forever DMs, make them players in Toons, and just see where it goes, because it's gonna be weird.
Just get as weird as humanly possible with it.
Exactly. Right? I think it's got to be YouTube gold, because
I wonder if you can and now let's get as meta as possible with this, right? I wonder if you can use that system to make Dungeons and Dragons the cartoon show, but using that rule set, right? Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, the characters in this have much different stat blocks, right? So they actually have stats that are bizarre to most Dungeons and Dragons players. And there's a section in it up front that I thought was really funny. Was hey, RPG players from other games, where you think before you act. This is the game where you act before you think.
Great, love it.
Which I'm like that. Actually, that's most RPG people, to be honest. But it's like, you want us to think through stuff. Forget that. Open the door, send in the Kender, call it a day, right? There's stats in here like throw, fire gun, chutzpah. Chutzpah. It's an important,
chutzpah. Love that.
It's important. It really matters. The species table includes things like robot, Tasmanian devil, canary, chicken hawk, parakeet, sea serpent, little green man.
I'm trying to imagine a party, a group of characters going through, and you've got on one side a canary, and on the other side you've got a sea serpent. Now, of course, I'm thinking like size of an actual ship sea serpent. I imagine they're not that big, right? But
probably not. But there is no option for human. There is, however, an option for human, but they don't call it human. They call it hairless ape. So
that's what I call myself every day I look in the mirror. Yeah. Oh, hey, the hairless ape.
Yeah. Every character has an occupation. It goes everything from baby, child, no apparent occupation, fireman, astronaut, mad scientist, doctor, hunter, maid, retired general, pirate.
Just the way you start that. The way you start that. Here's your occupation choices: baby, child, fireman. Oh, okay. Yes, the 3 stages of life.
Natural things to carry: lunch, string, rope, gun, balloons, squirting flour, picture of family, bucket, marbles, baling wire, chocolate chip cookies.
Attractive dress so you can become the opposite gender, like they would do in the old cartoon, so you can seduce the bad guy into being distracted for a minute. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. In addition to skills, characters must have things like shticks.
Oh yeah, of course.
So you must have a shtick. Yeah. So yeah, it's this to me. When I saw this, I'm like, I was asking for RPGs to put on my shelf, and somebody sent me a copy of this one. I was like, I got to find it. So I went eBay diving, and I'm like, Steve Jackson Games had some of the best stuff.
They're responsible for Munchkin, right?
They are, and Car Wars and a whole bunch of others that came out over the years. So
I haven't played Car Wars, although I have played a couple of the 4,000 variations of Munchkin that exist.
So yeah, I mean, someday, since you're a forever DM, I'll try to get you in. I'm going to get this put together. I have to go through and finish reading the instructions first. But
I have been told I am basically the living embodiment of a cartoon character, although which one I'm not entirely certain. So, boundless energy, some say. I call it plenty of Mountain Dew, right? That's what I call it. So, and a 6 cup of coffee a day habit, which is probably why I'm going to have a heart attack and die next week. So
6, that's rookie numbers, man. You got to get that stuff. So somebody asked me one day, he's like, how many cups of coffee do you drink? I was like, You measure it in cups? Really?
Yeah, two carafes? Like is that?
So, funny story. My grandfather, when he retired, he was a chemist, and he had this vegetable garden that was several acres. And as his kids, he had 8 kids. So he's like, I used to ask him, I was like, "How do you keep it?" When I was a kid, I asked him, I was like, "How do you keep it weeded?" He's like, "Well, one of my kids was always in trouble." I was like, "Well, what happens when nobody's in trouble?" He had 8 kids. He's like, "Oh, somebody's always in trouble." And I didn't realize when I became a parent. I'm like, okay, that makes way more sense than it used to make.
Somebody's always in trouble. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and if not, you just go find somebody and like, okay, what did you do, right? And sort of.
Yeah. Real quick, by the way, to be fair, 6-acre garden, we call that a farm, my friend. That's just a farm.
Well, yeah, he was weird. But as the kids left, it became less vegetable garden and more grapes. And he started making his own wine.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, my grandmother said, "You're only allowed to have 2 glasses a day." So he, being a chemist, he was trying to figure out just how to get the alcohol content higher and higher until borderline turning into sherry, but just stay on this side of it.
Right.
So he's like, if there's only going to be 2, they're going to count. It's like, I don't know what the alcohol content was there towards the end, but I heard some of them were pretty powerful. But he died when I was in 2nd grade, so I'm not allowed to know how the wine was. But
that reminds me of when I was in college, and I would say I'm only going to have 1 beer, so I get the tallest tall boy I could find. And be like, "See, it's just 1."
I was picking on my business partner the other day because I belong to a wine club. I was telling you before we started the thing, and he owns the wine club, right? So it's a little different. When I go to drink at the wine club, I'm asking prices, and he doesn't really ask all that often.
That would make sense if he owns it. Yeah,
he doesn't really give a shit what it costs, right? So whenever we have business meetings, like board meetings, that I try not to look at like when you own a company and you're the tech guy, I try to stay out of the financial side just because I want to stay good at what I do. So like I don't really look at the sales things except at the board meeting because I own enough of the company. I own 33% of the company, so I'm on the board, right? And so I go to board meetings and I go to the ops meetings and I occasionally show up to the sales meetings, but I don't like to look at them before I actually show up. That way I'm kind of, there for the purpose of the meeting. But I kind of picked on him the other day when he has meetings at the wine club, which he often does because there's a meeting room in the back. I can walk in and tell how the meeting's going to go. And he's like, "How'd you figure out how it's going to go?" I was like, "I can always tell based on what wine you have on the table. If the meeting sucks, it's a wine I can afford. And if the meeting's going to be good, it's a wine I would have to really ask about the pricing and then think about it." And he's like, "How do you think this one's going to go?" I was like, "Dude, you got a 99 Dom Perignon on the table. I'm thinking this one's good."
This is going to be a nice. On the other hand, if he has one of my blue raspberry Boudin farms on the table, then it's probably not going to be the greatest day. I'm kidding. Blue raspberry Boudin farm is the best.
I walked into one and we actually had water on the table. I was like, "Oh shit."
Oh, this is like. This is serious.
Actually, it was for one of his other companies I was kind of helping him with. It wasn't for my company. So it was like, "Oh, they're in trouble." I was like, that's why he brought me in, because he needed the fixer. But yeah, they had
just in front of your chair is just a large bottle of wine. Just like, no, he gets this. The rest of you, no.
I get the Magnum, like the 1.5 liter size.
Oh yeah, obviously. Like what are you gonna drink out of a baby bottle? Come on.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But no, I thought it was funny. I walked in, there was a 99 Dom Perignon. He's like, "Oh, so things are going well." He's like, "How'd you?" I was like, "Because the fucking wine, man."
You don't pull that out for the bad day, my dude.
Exactly. I was like, "How many of those are in the building?" He's like, "I don't know. I still got like 3 cases of them." I was like, "Oh, it's just laying around." Of course you got 3 cases.
As one does, right? As one does.
Actually, my favorite bottle of wine I've saw down there, and then I'll let you go. But the favorite bottle of wine I've ever seen in my entire life in a collection, and it was actually in my business partner's collection, was a 1942 Bordeaux, and I forget what the Bordeaux variety was. But my partner was telling me, he's like, "I'm going to open that one someday. I'm going to have a special event, and I'm going to open that." And I was like, I'm like lifting it up carefully to look at what it is, because it's from the 40s, and it's marked at the bottom for Führer use only. So it was actually brought back from Germany after World War II. And he's like, I was like, "I don't want to know how much you pay for that. I'm going to gently put it back on its little shelf." And he's like, "Someday I'm going to drink Hitler's wine." I'm like,
take that, Hitler, you dick. This is my wine now. Right?
I was like, what's sad is it's probably turned to vinegar at this point because it's so old. But I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, can I be here when you open? I don't want to try it. I just want to be here and film it when you open.
I just love the idea that Hitler was the kind of guy who's like, no, we have to make sure that the bottles are stamped like this.
Yeah,
Like, there's a whole industry that just rises up out of that. Like, it's like, oh, what do you have in your collection? Well, I have Hitler's toilet paper. You see, it's each individual sheet makes it very clear who this belongs to.
exactly.
I
I'd rather have toilet paper made out of Hitler than I would have it now.
I don't trying to imagine.
If you're gonna prove a point, prove it right. I mean, come on.
Sure, I understand the point. I don't know how much I want any part of that man touching my butt.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
If you gotta make a statement, make a good one. You know, it just
fair.
It's like when my kids tried to prank me, right? So you've got kids, I've got kids. Your kids ever try to prank you?
Oh, all the time.
Right. So my kids try to do that with me, and they forget that I was in the army and went to college, and like I will prank them back. And since I'm divorced, there's no wife around to tell me not to prank them quite that hard.
Right.
So I walked around one morning when they were half asleep and they wouldn't get out of bed to go to school. We have a tarantula named Blueberry that's about that big. And
yep, you do.
So I walked in the kids' room and I was like, "Hey, has anybody seen Blueberry? I can't find her." Also, be like, "Wait, what?" Like, hold on, wait.
Yeah,
they were up. Like, let's get out of bed. Come on.
Every so often I'll be scrolling through my feed and there's Blueberry up and I immediately drop my phone. Tarantulas are the most terrifying thing on earth to me. I don't like normal size spiders, not a problem. Tarantulas are my line. So I'll just be going through. I'm like, oh yeah, hey, what's Tim up to? What the Tim? Damn it!
Well, if it makes you feel better, I took some pictures of her cage, not of her.
Oh, I saw that you had those on there today, and I just scrolled as fast as possible. Like, nope.
She's not visible because she's decided to be antisocial.
Cool.
And she spun a bunch of webs so she can go back there and hide.
Yeah.
You can kind of see one leg on that one, but it's she's decided no. And what's freaky about tarantulas that I'm not sure everybody knows, they molt the outer layer of their skin.
They do.
It completely comes off. And I didn't know that when I first got one. And you look in one day and there's like two tarantulas because it comes off in one piece and it looks like another tarantula is in the cage.
Right.
And I was like, oh shit, what the hell is it's like what the hell's going on here? So I'm like calling the pet store going, and like, oh yeah, they molt. Just wait till one moves and then you take the other one out. I'm like, okay. Because you can't tell the difference in between them. They look exactly the same. I'm
right,
like,
because they all have they would have the hairy bristles.
It does.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wait until one moves because after they shed, they're kind of like they just sit there for a day or two because their outer exoskeleton has to harden, so they really don't move.
Right.
So if you put crickets or something in there for the eat, they can actually get hurt. So I'm like, when that happens, you just kind of have to like leave them alone for a day, and then one moves, you can go in and take the other one out. But it freaked me out the first time it happened. I was like, holy crap, I have a second spider.
I would I mean, just my daughter had a in daycare when she was my middle child, she her daycare got a tarantula for the room as a class pet. Mrs. Skinny Legs, I believe is what her name was. And I didn't know this until I went to go drop off my kid, and I walk in and just try to get her settled and such. I just look over and like I have a sixth sense for tarantulas in a room. Sort of the second I see a cage, right? Because there always there's like little like lizard cage or whatever. But like I there's some part of my brain that knows there's a tarantula in one. So I just sit there and like I just stare at it for like 5 straight minutes, not moving. Because my panic response to tarantulas are freeze. Maybe it's like a T-Rex and it won't see me if I don't move, right? And so from then on, mom had to take her to daycare.
Well, it's if you're afraid of them, this will make it worse. They can jump about 4.5 feet.
Yes, they can. Mm-hmm. Oh no, I know a lot about them.
They're dead accurate, man. If they see a cricket like 3-4 feet away, it can boom. It is right there.
Yep.
And it's like teleportation level. You don't need the DM doesn't need to talk about how fast they move. They're there.
We so tarantulas, they're native to your area, right? But then they've been slowly migrating up north for the past like like years. They've been migrating north as things tend to get warmer. So like there's there's a line, like there's a website you can go to that'll show you like where do tarantulas live now in the United States, and every year you see that line rise just a little bit further. And I'm in Kansas City right now. That line is just getting a bit too close for comfort for me.
So when I was a kid, we first moved here to Texas when I was in like the 6th grade. And I've moved in and out of Texas so many times at this point, it's like just silly. But when I first moved here in the 6th grade, that summer, my dad took us to the Dallas Zoo. And the zoo would have these little plaques next to every animal about where it was captured or where they found it or where it was from. And in the arachnid house, they had a bunch of spiders, and they were from Africa or Mexico or whatever. And the tarantula cage, it said parking lot.
Yeah, right.
And my mother was like, "The parking lot here?" It's like, well, yeah.
Yeah, they live here.
It's like the guy was like, "Yeah," and they're like, "Here, the parking lot I parked in." And they're like, "Ma'am, it's okay."
Yeah, it's fine. That's a no thank you for me, right? That's my wife and I were talking about where do we want to visit, what state do we want to travel to, or where do we want to go? And all my choices are always north, higher north, just further north, right? I keep threatening that we're going to be moving to Wisconsin soon. And she's like, "Oh, do you like it up there?" I'm like, "Sure, yeah, it's not that tarantula line I watch every year. No. It's I like the culture." The cheese
it has to do with GaryCon. You want to be close to GaryCon.
Never been to GaryCon actually. Gamehole Con been to. Love that. I was hoping to go to Gary this year, but unfortunately the funds didn't come together. And by the funds didn't come together, I mean Christmas is expensive with kids, man.
I'm telling you, it's not cheap. It gets worse.
Yeah. No, this is not getting better.
Yeah, it gets worse actually.
Yeah. Turns out their tastes get more expensive.
I was actually going to go down the list and just kind of go to all of them this year, and I was kind of like, you know what, I've got one more year where my kids don't have licenses, and like once Elliot gets his license, I'm like, next year I'm going to everything I can come up with. I'm like, GaryCon, Gen Con, Gamehole, I'm going to all of them.
Yeah.
So it.
Which ones have you been to so far? Or like, I know that not this year, but like, have you been to?
I haven't been to one in years, so I was so focused on my career forever that it was a physics conference or an AI conference or machine learning conference. I went to it, and if it was like, "Hey, you got a week off, you want to travel?" I'm like, "Oh God, no."
I want to sit in my own house.
That's like, because I was traveling sort of 60% of the time for a while, and you're a corporate trainer, right? So when you have to travel to go train somebody, everybody's like, "Oh, you get to travel. It's so much fun." I'm like, "No, no, it's not. You don't get it. It's like airport to conference room, back to airport. It's like, you don't get to see the city you're in. You just get to go work." It's like,
yeah. And it's typically you get to live in a hotel that you don't know very well, and you don't have your stuff with you except for what you can fit in one bag. And, you see all your money going back home to buy you that brand new chair that you've been wanting to sit in, but you don't get to sit in it because you're not home. Yeah.
And it's like, people are like, "Oh, airports are fun." No, they're not.
No, they're not fun.
They're fun if you see it twice a year. If you see it 3 times a month, they're not fun.
It's a fun experience when it's the one time you have to do this, right? It's like seeing your family at Christmas. We love seeing our family at Christmas, but I don't necessarily want to see them every single day. Yeah. I love my kids and my wife, that they are excluded from this.
So so since you have little kids, I will clue you in on one I actually just figured out today. So I work with people who have kids that are off in college, and I was like, "Oh, all your kids went back to college. Don't you miss them?" They're like, "Yeah, kind of, but not really." It's like when you have kids at home, you have kids at home. When I have kids at home, I have adults at home.
Yeah.
So it's like now I have fewer adults in the house, and that's kind of just easier at some level. And I'm like, that kind of makes sense, actually, in a weird ass kind of way. It's like you get to see your kids breathe. It's like, okay, great, now go home. Come back with grandkids. We'll call it a day.
What is it? My mom always used to tell me, because she was a very loving mother, how can I miss you if you don't go away? Right.
I will give you one that'll make you laugh even more than that. Twice actually in my life, in front of my dad, I made my mother so mad she called me a son of a bitch. And I went, "Kind of agree with you, Mom." And my dad was like, "Oh dear God."
Oh no.
It's like you're on your own. I don't care.
To be fair, sweetheart, you walked into that one, but
so she was like, "Damn it." So anyway, I thought it was funny.
No, it's good. I like that. It's good.
I'm with you, Mom. All right, so I'm gonna put together some stuff for Toon, man. If you want to play a character, I'll start.
Yeah, if I got the time, I'd love to sit down for one shot or something with that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get Richard Witters, you, probably Bill Sylvie, because he's always the DM, right? And you got to get Bill out of the DM chair. And if we can pull it off, although she doesn't like to do things online like that, maybe Harmony Ginger.
Oh, I love Harmony.
Yeah, one or two other people. The rabble rousers of Twitter that are willing to actually look at new things without having our fingers fall off and
Right.
fall to shreds. But yeah, I'm gonna get a couple people together to play because it just looks like fun.
Yeah, that'd be a hoot, right? No,
I mean, well, thanks for coming by. I don't want to keep you all night, but I appreciate the conversation, man.
Absolutely.
Bye,
Thanks for having me, man. Bye.
I'm gonna end the stream. Stick around for a second if you can.